Actually, first of all, wow, the talk of Fabian resonated with me so much, all the storytelling. But I think he's missing one Angular mistake, something that I did too. I completely forgot about Angular accessibility. And today we're going to talk about this, about the unexpected parts. So what to expect? Well, as Fabian also said, the more you learn, the more you know what you don't know. So accessibility, oh, I have to hide this one. Thank you. Just hide it whatsoever. Just go away. I think it's good enough. Yeah. So the more we learn, the more we know that what we don't know. And they say accessibility is some kind of unknown. Many of us who haven't dealt with accessibility before just don't know what they don't know. And this is just like the entry point towards it. And today we're going to talk about accessibility, but first, just a brief introduction. You know my name, you know my title. So I'm... That's so funny. So I'm a front-end technology lead. Actually, I'm a freelancer, so I can call myself anything. I could be a CEO, but they decided to be front-end technology lead. I'm a Google developer. I'm a Google developer expert in Angular, and I've been giving courses on Angular and accessibility since 2 years. But I decided this year it's not enough, and I'm now writing a book on accessibility, and this could be a self-promotion, but the book is not finished yet. So, moving on, what is the unexpected part? First of all, I just brought, since I have 30 minutes, I brought one number with me, and this is 4%, and it says 4% of babies are born with disabilities, which what this number does not say is 96% of people get disabled throughout the course of life, meaning it can happen to anyone, it can happen to me, and well, they say we're just temporarily abled. So when we build accessible applications, we're doing this for ourselves. Well, this is a very nice human thing, but I'm a bit of a sarcastic person and quite a pessimistic person too in this regard. We build accessible applications because we also have to. And I have a question for you. Who of you have heard about the European Accessibility Act? Barrierefreiheitsgesetz? Yeah, some hands are raised, some are not. So, a new kid in town, European Accessibility Act. It is a European directive which obliges all countries in the European Union to introduce national legislation on accessibility. That's the first time in the history that even like private sector websites, including e-commerce, have to be accessible. So everything which leads to a contract has to be accessible by now. And the question is, what does it mean? Like, what are the rules? What are the requirements? And this directive, or also called the European Accessibility Act, refers to the European norm 301 and 549. And this norm refers to web content accessibility guidelines. I'm telling you this in this detail so that you know what rules you should play by. Like, basically, we have this international standard which has precise requirements how to make your app accessible. What is then this web content accessibility guidelines? In a nutshell, it states that a website is accessible if it's designed and implemented in a way that users can perceive the content, like see it, read it, hear it, whatever. They can operate it, they can interact with your website, and they can understand this content. In the best case, it should be in the robust way, meaning for the future versions, on different devices, on different operation systems, it should just work and be perceivable, operable, and understandable. These principles are divided into guidelines, and these guidelines are divided into success criteria. And these criteria are the basic requirements that you can look up and which could guide you on your way to more accessibility. The success criteria are grouped into three groups: conformity levels, A, AA, and AAA. And for the European Accessibility Act, we need to comply with the level A and AA. This is no new. What about Angular? And how accessible is Angular? Alex is smiling. Well, there are several opinions in the internet. First of all, on the one hand, one might say there's nothing special to Angular. It's just web, and web can be or cannot be accessible, and that's the same rules that we all play by. On the other hand, well, there's some opinions saying single-page applications just cannot be accessible by default. Like, just forget it. It's not possible. And the same with custom components, and the combination is even worse. So before you answer this question for yourself, I'd like to present some arguments for both sides. Let's start with the left part, like nothing special about Angular accessibility. There is no accessibility in the browser. Like, browser doesn't speak Angular, it speaks HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and ARIA. And HTML gives you the structure, JavaScript gives you some movements, interactions, etc. CSS, well, helps you to hide some parts or make it look more beautiful. And ARIA is just the cognition, the semantics behind your construct. So all put together, we get a living, thinking person, or just a living application, well, that could be accessible or not. Just for some of you who don't know what ARIA is, ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. And it is a set of attributes that can be added to your HTML to give more, to provide the information about the role, some states or properties, and but only in the case it's missing in the HTML. So, well, accessible stays in the name of this term. So one might think the more ARIA, the better. Well, which is not, because ARIA is a promise. Well, not that kind of promise, we are having signals now, but it's a promise that we're giving to the users. And if we say that this is a button, then it has to behave like a button. It has to look like a button, it has to smell like a button. It has to be a button. Otherwise, we will confuse our users or make them sad, and we don't want to make our users sad. So if there's one thing that I want you to take away from my talk, it's not even Angular, it's just this: if you're using ARIA, please do this with care. Well, the rest will be fine. But coming back to Angular, so well, that was the first part. Maybe there's indeed nothing special. You've seen there's no Angular in the set of technologies that browser speaks. But if this is the case, why do they have a special section on best practices on accessibility in the documentation? And if you're not aware of this resource, I warmly recommend it. That's a great starting point. Then again, if there's nothing special to Angular accessibility, why do they have code labs on accessibility? And here again, warm recommendation, look it up. It's a nice way to learn more about accessible aspects of Angular. And since my talk has this unexpected part, I have a question, like, what happens if you apply router link to an image? And, well, I see some puzzling faces. While you're thinking of this, I'm going to sit down, I hope this is okay for the camera, and jump to the code. So I have an application here which has some basic use cases. I have a form. I think I might make it a bit bigger. I have a form, I have some books, I have some text, some tables, some YouTube embeds, well, some use cases for accessibility. So let's add the router link. I have here the image, which is the logo, and I just put the router link on it and, well, use about page. Let's have a look into the DevTools. I'm going to make it a bit bigger. This is my logo. Make it a bit. Here's my logo, there's the router link, all good. There's my alt tag. And then suddenly I have tab index 0, and this is not the code that I wrote. So what happened? Angular recognized that by adding the link to my image, I made an interactive element out of it. And all interactive elements have to be accessible by keyboard. Tab index 0 makes this element focusable. So if I tap through it, you see, I can focus it. Here we go. So, well, apparently there is something in between the browser and your code, which has an influence on accessibility. By the way, this is still not the optimal way of developing your links, because screen readers wouldn't know how to announce this link. There is no text to that. So the best way to do this is usually just take your link, your anchor tag, and wrap the image within it. In this case, this is the semantic, normal, intuitive solution. Coming back to the question. So maybe there is still a thing that we have to consider to make our apps accessible. For this, I would like to show the overview over the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines again. And I've highlighted some areas where you might have some issues or you might have some help from Angular. Some syntactical sugar you can use, some nice features to make it more accessible. In detail, there are some points here, the most important ones. And I start with page title. Well, Angular is a single page application. Like with Angular, we're creating single page applications. Basically, we're lying to our users that they navigate by updating the view in accordance to the URL. So, well, technically, it's still the same document, one title. Once we navigate, we have to take care by ourselves to pretend even further that there are different pages. Well, to do so, you probably already know it. We have the router option for that. I go to the routes, and here I have my titles. This is the lowest hanging fruit ever. Just edit it. Well, it doesn't cost you any money. If you have some special things, you can also have also the title service for that. And for some use cases, you can also implement your own custom title strategy. And that could be a case if you want to add your name of the website at the end of every single page title. In this case, you have about. You could also put accessible reads at the end. But as I said, that's quite a traditional technology. It has been for a while. So I'm not going deeper into detail how to implement a custom title strategy. It's just the basic web implementation. Next point, location. Location is actually a AAA requirement, but it's very easy to fulfill and to meet it. Well, first of all, you've already heard about the router active. I go to the navigation, and you have router link active. I'm going to zoom in. Oops, I'm going to zoom in a bit. So you probably have heard about it. By this, I can add a class, and then if I go to my application, it will nicely underline the active view now, like the active element in the navigation that corresponds to the active view. Well, the problem with that is it's visible, but it's not hearable. Like the screen readers don't have this information. So the next thing that we could add, which is also there out of the box, coming with the router, ARIA current when active. And we use page with that because that's the active page that we are having now. With that, if I navigate, I'm just going to concentrate on, let's start with books. That's my active item now. And you have ARIA current page here, which is already ARIA. So that's what Angular does for me under the hood. It adds ARIA current natively. If I gonna go to a different page, it's gonna take ARIA current from books and append it to about accessible reads. So coming out of the box, easy to use, a low-hanging fruit. Sticking to the navigation, it could be annoying. For this, it's a Christmas time, everyone's shopping. So if you go to Amazon and you want to go to the main content, if you're a keyboard user, you don't have any cheat sheet normally. Like mouse users have some kind of elevator. They can jump to any floor if they want to. Keyboard users have to tap through every single focusable element. Well, here, if I keep tabbing, I think I can just, feel the whole talk with that. So I just refresh it. Well, what Amazon does and many other pages do, once you've seen that, you probably will see similar design patterns on other pages. It's a skip link. it's a focus element which is hidden by default, and once I focus that per keyboard, it gets visible, and then I can just skip to the main content. Well, this is, again, some normal web development, some CSS magic, and that's it, and a bit of HTML. And if I try to do that in my Angular application, I have the main element here. I have an ID. Well, then I have the skip link, and I would just add this ID, content. Coming back. So here we go. It's here. So it works. If I try to activate it, well, something strange happens, because suddenly I'm at the books. I was at about, and I wanted to skip it to the main contents. Instead, the page reloads, which is not the sense of single-page applications. That's not what we want. So what's the problem? What's the issue? It's a single-page application. So in this case, our link sits in the app component, which is not a routed component, and it doesn't know about the URL we're at. So we have to assemble our URL by ourselves to link it there. So I just revert the solution. And what I'm doing here is I'm building my skip link path by myself. I'm injecting a router, and I'm getting the URL. And then I just take this URL and add the content there. So once, oops. So here we go. If I do this, yeah, it should be. So I think I already have a lot of content there. So it works. So I will come to the main content and staying on the same page. So yeah, some little parts to consider when implementing a skip link. Next thing is focus order. And well, once again, when we are talking about multi-page applications, the focus gets reset when we navigate from one page to another. In here, we stay in the same document, which means the state of the focus is being kept. And with that, if I go, for example, to About page and tab further, I have a link at the end of the page, which links it back to the books. If I activate it, well, where does the focus go? The problem is the state is not being resetted. So it was on the element which no longer exists. And if the element disappears, the focus goes on, depending on the browser, of course, well, but it mostly goes to the containing container. And, well, the containing container is a main element in this case. And main cannot be focused by the keyboard. And that's why it's lost at the moment. So if I keep tabbing, it will eventually go to the next element. But the problem is now we lost the focus. And this is a potential violation of one of the criteria of Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So what you can do is you could, resemble the navigation of the multi-page applications and just focus the first focusable element of the page. One of the ideas would be to focus the skip link, though the downside of it is that it becomes visible for everyone, and some designers might not approve that. Well, you might also let it be like this, just because if I wanted to go to books from my About page, I actually went to books. Well, at this point, I actually don't have like a bulletproof solution, just one solution that I would recommend. And if you have some ideas, let's talk about them after the talk. Yeah, but this is, at this moment, it's just like a thing to consider. You have to take care of your focus and don't lose it. Next point, autofocus. You have to be very careful about that because usually users don't like to be moved somewhere. And if you autofocus it, you will land in the middle of the page. The guidelines say that it's okay to use autofocus if all users regardless disabilities, etc., will want this thing to be focused. For example, Google homepage. Well, everyone probably want to search something. Or, well, the first input field in the on the login page would be also an option for that. I have a form here. So let's say for some reason which is not, well, just don't question my reasons in this respect. I want to autofocus the ISBN field. So I would just put autofocus here. Oh, good. And it works. Like I just reload it, and I immediately land in the ISBN field. Sounds fine. I navigate away and come back, and suddenly autofocus doesn't work anymore. So, what's the reason? Yes. Well, autofocus being evaluated once you land on the document, like for the first time, and after that it's not evaluated again, even if the view is being initialized again. So what you can do here, well, autofocus yourself. I don't have it in the code, but this is just the basic grabbing the element and focusing it. And if you do it this way, it is guaranteed that every time the components being initialized, this input field will be focused. Some things to consider. There's another requirement from the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. We have to inform our users if some things change. And the thing with JavaScript is that it doesn't work silently. If we add something or remove something, we can see it, but we cannot hear it. So what can we do about it? First of all, we can work with that from the UX perspective. For example, if you have a search where the results are represented while you're typing, just warn your users or just tell them that the results will be displayed while you are typing. If you add something just under the trigger, for example, there is a button which adds something and it will be displayed just after this button, that's also fine because that's the natural order of focusing stuff with the screen reader and announcing it with the screen reader. But if you add something at some random place, some toast message at the bottom or at the beginning of the page, while the user is somewhere else, well, you have to make sure that this information will get to everyone. For that, you can use live regions. It's also some part of ARIA specs. And Angular has some nice syntactic sugar for that, too. For this, you can use the Angular Material CDK. And in my title strategy, I decided that I would like to announce the page titles once the user navigates to this new page. For this, I extend the title strategy, and in my update title, I inject live announcer before, and then I just call live announcer.announce, and then I can tell it, like the live announcer, what to announce. How does it work? If I go to the page, at the very bottom, there is a div. Again, this is something which I didn't write. So there is a div with some classes, which I could use just to hide my element visually, just visually. And then I have ARIA Live set to polite so that the screen reader will announce these new things only after previous announcements are done. It is ARIA atomic, meaning that all the changes in this div element will be announced at once, and not only the new ones. And when I navigate, in between there is the text of the title. If I navigate, it updates the text between the div tags, and this is the live area, how you know it from normal native web development without Angular. So this is a very nice syntactic sugar for announcement of changes. Next point, forms. Who loves forms? Very nice. In here, we have some nice features from Angular, which are not new for you, I guess. First of all, we have ng-submit, which is a nice out-of-the-box thing that you can put on the form, and you will get the submission by enter key, so that no matter where I am on my form, if I hit enter, the form gets submitted, but only if I have one submit button. If I have reset, it won't work. And you have to be careful with asynchronous validation because ng-submit might not wait for that. Still, a very nice usability feature. It's not a must criteria from accessibility point, but it's a very nice to have. Then the error messages. Well, we see them. If I have here ISBN, I see an error message popping up. How to inform the screen reader users that there is something new? So we could use live regions. That's the term, live regions. But there is a simpler solution for that. I have my inputs, which are, of course, nicely connected with labels, with ID and for. This is not new from the accessibility perspective. And then I have an error message, which has the ID of ISBN error, and my input has ARIA described by, which references to this error message. And if I put it like this, whenever you focus input field, the error message will be announced too. So our screen reader users will be informed about the problem. And I also toggle ARIA invalid so that my users also know what's about the input field. With Angular forms, in here I have reactive forms, but it's the same for the template-driven forms. You have the option of checking and showing it conditionally if the form is invalid. You can actually also check for specific errors, like has error, and then the particular error from your validators. And then you have pre-seen or touched, and you can decide, like you can display the message not at the beginning. It's still invalid. It's a required field. It's not filled in, so it's invalid. But of course, it's not. Well, it's intimidating to show error messages before you even enter some data. So by checking if it's a touched field, I can toggle this too. So yeah, some nice features in here. Next thing is name, role, value criteria, saying that our interactive elements have to have an accessible name. I don't have time to tell more about accessible names in general, but it means that our buttons and links have to be announced to the screen readers, or the screen readers have to know what to announce when the links or buttons are focused. And there is a potential pitfall in case of @for loops. Whenever you're looping through something and display it on the UI, there is a potential problem with that because it's all the same. You are treating elements the same, meaning if I look at the buttons and links on my books, this is a close button, this is a close button. There are 250 close buttons on this page. Well, it's not really helpful for the screen reader users if they don't know what they're closing. Or I think it's even deleting, so it's even worse. And the same goes for read more. That's a classical one. If you have 250 links, read more, well, you don't know where to go with that. So if your designer team doesn't want you to display more information, you have to hide it visually. It's important, do not use NGA for that because it will remove it from the DOM, and once it's removed from the DOM, it's not accessible for assistive technologies. So here I'm using some CSS magic just to hide it visually by positioning it off the screen and making it really small. So if you're interested in this, talk to me later. But the most important part here is to comply with this requirement. Just add some title or some information about these links. It doesn't cost you much. You already have this information in your loop. The same goes for form arrays. Whenever you're looping through something, and this is something interactive, please hear my voice in your ears and add some details for that. The last but not the least, information and relationships. HTML is a very tolerant language, and it will try to figure out what you mean in the most cases. But there are some things where it is really strict. For example, if you're going to try to display a div within a list element, it won't work because an unnumbered, unordered, or ordered list expect list elements within it. And kudos go to Yunus and Sam for bringing up this topic or this example in our chat. Let's say you are trying to loop through some list elements in your unordered list, And if your list is full, all fine. But if your list is empty, what do you display there? You cannot go with a div because divs wouldn't be rendered within unordered lists. So, but you can also put like a list item saying there is no list items. That's not really semantic. So in this case, you have to fall back to the standard solution with if and else, because that's the more semantic approach to HTML. The same goes with some other nested relationships. For example, legend within a field set. It has to be the first element, otherwise it won't work for assistive technologies. So whenever you're nesting some items within a container, you have to check the specs or just fall back to the semantic HTML there. Don't cut your components at this border. With this being said, I come to the question, how accessible is Angular? And well, this is probably not so unexpected. It's up to you. With that, thank you very much.